I need, no chase I need, no chase I need, no chase. Message.
I don't know what would you call it, but something like a plantation to me. It belonged to several different white people. They all was family, I guess. And you couldn't leave. And if you did leave, they either come get you or have somebody kill you, whatever. That's what happened. They did my mama bad.
What'd they do to your mother?
They just had my mother, the white men. They just do what they wanted to do with her. And I just wasn't big enough to do nothing. If I would have been, I don't know, probably wouldn't be.
And this was in the 1950s or 40s?
That was on through the 40s, in the 50s, all through the 50s, and part of the 60s.
So what would the repercussions be if you tried to leave or if you tried to refuse what they wanted?
Back in them days, it was kind of like you had to do what the white man said or get killed.
Right here on American soil, in this great country, we still had slavery going on during the 1960s. You see, oftentimes, white America act as if slavery was so long ago. Okay, let's go that route, right? Slavery was quite some time ago. If we want to talk about the 1800s, yes, of course.
America was founded when a group of Protestant Christians, fleeing religious persecution in Europe, made the harrowing journey across the Atlantic Ocean and landed at Plymouth Rock. These pilgrims had a feast with the Indians to celebrate their cooperation, and that became the holiday of Thanksgiving. Over the next few decades, several other British colonies were founded on the American continent, and in 1776, they all declared their independence from the king over the issue of taxation without representation. After the Revolutionary War had been won, the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution, a freedom-loving liberty document which guaranteed that all men were created equal. There's one glaring hypocrisy with that statement, though, the fact that slavery existed in America. How could the Founding Fathers believe in equality while many of them were also slave owners? Well, many of them knew that this peculiar institution was morally wrong and thought that the practice would naturally die out on its own. But just to be sure, they put a clause in the Constitution saying that the importation of new slaves would end in 1808. It's a common misconception that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, but the Emancipation Proclamation only applied to areas in active rebellion, meaning the Confederate States. There was no way to enforce that without invading, and the northern slave states were unaffected, so this didn't really do much. In reality, it wasn't the Great Emancipator, but the 13th Amendment, ratified 8 months after his assassination, that abolished slavery. After Reconstruction ended, though, things got pretty dark pretty fast. Within a decade, black codes had been passed in every southern state, and many of them required literacy tests and poll taxes to vote. This is the beginning of Jim Crow, an era where black people had to sit at the back of the bus and drink out of separate water fountains. They even had separate schools for white kids and black kids. That lasted until 1954, when the Supreme Court decided to desegregate public schools with the Brown v. Board of Education decision. This began the civil rights movement, which gave rise to leaders like Martin Luther King, who said we should judge each other not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. With the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Jim Crow and segregation were over, and America had finally swept away the last vestiges of racism in the country. We even elected a black man as president. Twice. So the next time someone tells you that America is a racist country with racism in our DNA, hopefully now you'll know better.
Move this man!
What about mass incarceration?
Message!
What about the crack era?
Message!
The war on drugs?
Message!
Make sure you go back and watch those videos. nobody pushed the opioid crisis on the white community. During the crack era, crack was pushed on us and they took the jobs. On top of that, when you talk about mass incarceration, laws were passed that completely eliminated any type of judge's discretion. I mean, there's tons of things to name.
Growing up, were you fully aware, this is in the 40s and 50s, you know, the civil rights movement is just about to begin. Were you aware of what was going on in the rest of the country at that time for black people pursuing freedom?
No.
You weren't aware at all that there was any pursuits for freedom in the 40s and 50s for us?
No, not really.
Have you heard about Mae Louise Miller? Well, this woman was enslaved during the 1960s.
We didn't have no clothes to wear. We didn't have no shoes. We didn't have food to eat. We didn't have a bed to sleep in. We didn't have a house to live in. We slept on the grass or the dirt or the hay. Pulled the hay over on top of us for our cover. We had a croquet sack for our clothes, which was a one piece. That was it. It cut a hole in each arm, a hole in the neck, and that was your clothes, the men and the women.
Mae's father, Cain Wall, lost his farmland after he signed a contract that he could not read. This right here put him in debt to other plantation owners who was about to take advantage of him. The Wall family was forced to do field work and housework for several white families who attended the same church on the Louisiana-Mississippi border. The Wall family was not permitted to leave the land. They were illiterate, and they were also under the impression that all black people were being treated the same.
We caught what we ate, and we ate what we got. It was from the stales to the worms, from the worm to bird eggs, from bird eggs to birds, crickets, rabbits, snakes. We took bites, you know. We just ate. What? People saying that you can't eat raw this, you can't eat raw that. Oh, yeah. When you see survivors on television, that's just a sample. We are the survivors. Every once in a while, we did get a meal, what they call a meal, but it was the food that they had raked from the tables for maybe about a month. They would rake it all in a tub or big old thing, and they sit it out on the tree. And for calling you niggas, it's time for you to eat. When we didn't really know what a spoon and a fork was, it was only the 60s. We ate we laid like dogs, and we ate like a hog. We ate with our head, with our mouth in the pots, or dipped it with our hands.
And when they received their food, it was all thrown together like slop. Animals were treated better than them. Mae spoke about, starting at the age of 5 years old, she was repeatedly the R word that rhymes with tape, along with her mother. Several men, and whatever men were present at the time, all got a turn on her and her mom. She stated that they've always wanted to run away. But they thought everybody were in the same predicament. And also, they thought, where would they run to?
And he said, Lord, I just can't take it no more. I got to go. My dad said he was going down through the woods and he came up on the side of the bank. There come two white men. They were riding in a truck. Old T-Mom or something. He said, oh boy, what's something happened to you? And he says, oh, I've been beat, but I got to go. I got a wife, 7 children back there. So I can't take it no more. This is your case. Come on, boy. We got something for you. Come on. Get in this truck. Lay down. We gonna take you to a place named Jackson, Mississippi. They is enrolling peoples. And Uncle Sam learned. My dad said he was so relieved. He didn't know what Uncle Sam learned was. He was so relieved. He didn't know what to do. They laid him back up and said, and he stopped to get up, boy. You here now. He said, got up with the blood rolling off of him. Happy made them when he. And they said, called a man and said, come here. One of the leaders of the place. Say, here this boy here. We brought him back to you. He told us he came from here. And he was trying to run away. But here he is back. And my dad said, they beat him and beat him and beat him and beat my daddy. From sun up to sundown, and all he did was work. They killed people in front of our face. We seen them hanging from the tree. We seen them take babies, cut them in little bit of pieces, put them in their sack, go fishing with them. Seen them kill my auntie, chopped her up in pieces. And I also made my uncle dig his own grave.
That's it.
The Wall family obtained their freedom in 1961, which is sometimes inaccurately given as 1962 or 1963. At the age of 18, May refused to do housework for another family in Kentwood, Louisiana. She ran away after the owner threatened to kill her. She said she remembered thinking that they just gonna have to kill me today because I'm not doing this anymore. Smithsonian's Institution historian Pete Daniel noted that white people from that area held blacks down, and they weren't afraid to use their power. They were brutal. Another historian, Antoinette Harrell, said in many of these districts, the sheriff had worked with the local community, all in cahoots to keep people in captivity. 100%. May said that she had no idea what she was going through was actually illegal. She stated that the Wall family's world was confined from one plantation to the other. They'll trade you off, they'll come back to get you one day and on to the next day. Annie Wall recounted that the plantation owner said, you better not tell anybody, because we'll kill you. We'll kill all you niggas.
Imagine you and your family living in this barn, forced to live like animals and with animals. No heat, no electricity, none of the things we commonly take for granted. This is the case of one family, held as slaves up until the 1960s. We found this barn at Grange Hall Road and MS Highway 568 near Vicksburg, Mississippi in July 2009.
We really didn't have much of nothing. And the clothes we had was a cocoa sack. Each one of us had a cocoa sack with 3 holes cut in it, and that was your clothes. Your shirt, pants, and underclothes, or whatever you want to call it, dress. We had no shoes. We were just kind of like Tarzan. Whatever was there come in front of you, that was your meal, if you caught it. And that was our motto.
The following video contains strong sexual content. Viewer discretion is advised.
They would bring my mother to the house. And when they bring my mother to the house, one of us would have to go with my mother, so the master said. And so this was the particular time that I had to go with my mom. So they raped my mom. And when it came to me, I was sitting there crying because, when you don't know what's going on, I was sitting up there crying in this. And so the lady said, they coming to me. So the master's wife said to him, and the other brothers or whoever they were, and she said, and they was sort of looking, and she said, oh no, no honey, no, no. And she says, she's not even a heifer yet. I didn't learn what that word was till over in the 70s. And she said, she's not even a heifer yet. She's just a yearling. You can't. But they gagged my mouth, and they raped me just like they did my mama. And there I was laying in that pile of blood. A little bit of girl didn't know what to do. And his wife had to clean me up. But that never stopped. And I remember telling my mom, if you go tell that old nigger what happened here today, we's gonna kill everybody.
Message.
Well, as I moved around the state of Louisiana and Mississippi and listened to other people talk about their family history, I soon learned there was a hidden secret in America. What was this secret? What's not in the textbooks that most people who go to Harvard University and other Ivy League colleges wasn't taught? The second coming of slavery. And some books that say it was called worse than slavery. What could be worse than slavery? Well, in slavery as chattel property, they had a reason to protect their property, feed their property, clothe their property. But when slavery was abolished, it had a different look. And I want to take you down that road.
Message.
It's a part of my history. And it is a part of the history that makes America what it is. Let's take that journey. What's not in the history books? The untold history of involuntary servitude, which was another name for slavery, because no one volunteered to go back in slavery. When did slavery end in America? Like most people, I learned that it ended in 1863, but I learned differently. 1863, 1865, as Juneteenth approaches in Galveston, Texas, is saying we're about to celebrate our history of freedom. The Gullah Geechees in South Carolina told me 2 weeks ago, April the 2nd, we got our freedom in 1865. 1944, 1963, in the height of the Civil Rights Movement. What are we talking about? People still being in slavery.
Message.
1973, 2000. Did I miss something? 1973, 2000? I can only imagine my ancestors just rejoicing and being so happy that they are free, and that they probably danced and cried and became emotional probably for 24 hours and then realized, where am I going to go? We have no food. We have nowhere to go. We have no clothes. We have elderly people with us. We have disabled people with us. What are we going to do? So, as President Abraham Lincoln said, well, we would devise a new contract called the Freedmen Bureau contracts. And I do believe in my research that they didn't make their X. If you can make an X, you can make an A. You can write an A, you can write a B. Even the X was forged, forcing children as young as 5 years old to work on these plantations for the remainder of their life, unless they ran away and found freedom. I took the plane and I went to Washington, D.C. to the National Archives and looked in the classification record group 50 and 60. So I'm sitting there reading these documents and the tears is flowing down my eyes because I couldn't believe what I was reading. What do you mean the new coming of slavery? They told us we was free. I soon learned it was on paper.
Message.
The cases that I found revealed that slavery exists in 20 states. How do I know? The records that I'm going to introduce you to will tell you that slavery exists in 20 states. The states that I cover, Louisiana, Mississippi, because that's where my ancestors was in these states here. May and Arthur is still living. We lost May. And she was the modern day Harriet Tubman, because she said, they can't do to me what they haven't already done.
Message.
At least if I'ma die, let me die free.
Message.
I'ma tell it.
Message.
And we held hands. Now let's tell it together, our freedom. The time that I spent with May, listening to our story, and how they had to eat birds, and we can't even imagine trying to eat a little robin or bird eggs just to have food to eat. And I remember one day I wanted to drive to this place called Gilbert, Mississippi. I was frightened just driving there because it feels like the hair on my arm was standing up because, I had to just go instinctively as to where am I? These places that most of those that was enslaved was in isolated communities. Off the main highway, down those dusty roads, no trespassing signs. This is how they was kept enslaved. The Wall family consists of a father, mother, and 7 children. The 5 older children was the ones that was held enslaved. May and Arthur were sharecroppers in Gilbert, Mississippi. At the end of crop year, they was told they didn't make money for the pay. They didn't make enough money to pay for the seeds, the tools, and other items. Each year, like most of the people that was enslaved, try next year, you may do a little better and you can pay off your debt. They never could pay off their debt. First of all, who was going to challenge them? Who was going to challenge the sheriff, the judge, the business owners, the rich farmers? You dare not question them. As May tell it, and this is what she told ABC Nightline. She spent her youth in Mississippi as a slave, picking cotton, pulling corn, picking peas, picking butter beans, picking string beans, digging potatoes, whatever it was, that's what you did for no money at all. Millie and her sister Annie tells of bondage ending in the 60s. Annie is still afraid today. She's afraid to talk about it. She was afraid that day because she thought they was going to kill her. And one day when CNN came to me and they wanted to talk to their father, who was 107 years old at that time, well, he gave me his story. He talked about what he saw, what he went through. He called the names out. And one day while watching TV, he saw this white man on the television, and he thought the man was coming to get him because he shared his story with me. He went into the hospital, and the family banned me for 1 year because they didn't want to lose their father. They was afraid of he was going to have a heart attack. And it was then he said, no, I started talking to her, and I'm going to finish it. Arthur's story. This is May and her two brothers. I took them back to Gillsburg, Mississippi for the first time in 50 years. And if a picture can tell a story, the fright that was on all three of their faces, I couldn't understand that fright, but they knew if anybody passed down the road and saw them, what that could have meant for them. There's only one person that's still living, and that's the man with the dark shirt on. That is Arthur. I'm sorry that Arthur couldn't be here today due to health reasons, but this is in his words.
And we couldn't leave. You know, we was on those people's place, I'm telling you about. So I don't know who owned all of them, but Alonzo Gard was the main man that
Arthur, well, his father talked about how his uncle had to dig his own grave. And when he dug that grave, he didn't know what he was digging it for, but they shot him because they wanted to have a relationship with his wife, and his wife said no that day. And once again, you don't tell a white man no in the South. What did that mean? Letters to the presidents of the United States. Who would have thought that after President Abraham Lincoln emancipated those? Thank you, David. That letters would be written to other presidents asking them to free those that were still in slavery. Files from the Department of Justice, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the FBI files. The three presidents that was aware that slavery wasn't abolished: Calvin Coolidge, Warren Harding, and Franklin D. Roosevelt received letters asking that they abolish this new form of slavery. This letter that Calvin Coolidge wrote, this letter was written to Calvin Coolidge in 1927. In Vicksburg, Mississippi, free people are being herded back to the plantation. The planters hold their laborers at gunpoint. I want to go back there. And when I scanned this document at the National Archives, I said, there's going to be people who do not believe this, so let me just scan it in its natural form. And even with what you see, some people still doubt it. And I begin to understand why May said what she said. Who's going to believe me? And I soon learned who was going to believe me when I spoke the truth. Franklin D. Roosevelt, 1942. It brings me to mind my mother was born in 1940. So slavery was well and alive.
Message.
This letter came out of Hiding Valley, Mississippi. 300 to 500 Negroes bound in the shackles of slavery. The plantation is well guarded. Many men and women was killed on these plantations. Letters like this and documents like this made me realize, what am I looking at? Torture, abuse, murders, beatings. I felt, why wasn't this in the history book? Why didn't he talk about this? Why was this the best kept secret in America? Message. 1944, again, Sunflower, Mississippi. William Henry Huff, the director for the Abolished Peonage Committee of America, he was writing, asking the president to end and to eradicate the new form of slavery. Would you please end it? Now, if slavery wasn't in existence, why would we still be asking 3 presidents to end slavery in America? The hometown, the childhood hometown of Kosciuszko, Mississippi. And this is one of the documents I'll never forget, because when I went to the courthouse and the records was in the attic, and they was told that they don't go in the attic because ghosts is in the attic. My opportunity. I'm going in that attic. I'm gonna make as much noise as I can as the ghost talking. I'm free. And so the one thing I told the ghost, look, I just need you to show me the papers. Show me where it's at. I'm here to set you free. So I just started moving stuff around and making noise to really make them think that ghost was really in the attic. But what was in the attic was these stories that wanted to come out the attic, that they was hiding in the attic. You know, we always think about what's in the attic. Murders was in the attic. Records was in the attic that you couldn't access. This sheriff, he was arresting colored as well as white people on trumped up charges and placing heavy fines to work at the sawmill. And I wrote a letter to Oprah, can you do a segment on this? Never got any reply. But when I was in Zambia, I know I want to get out of there, because when I think about this part of the world, I think about Philadelphia, Mississippi, where those civil rights boys was killed. Once again, my hair stood up on my own, because when I met resistance, when I knew that I was in the courthouse, and I remember this man looking at me, and when he was looking at me, it was like saying, oh, I just wish that we can turn back the hands of time, because you won't be touching those records. So I took my beautiful black golden hand and I touched all the documents, because I knew that he couldn't do anything about it. But in his eyes it said, if I could, you weren't the lucky ones. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, 1943. When I think about Mississippi, most of us that know anything about Nina Simone, they say Mississippi, goddamn. And Mississippi right now is still trying to turn back the hands of time and walk them back. Come on. Jim Crow, Jane Crow, let's turn back the hands of time. We're back at it again. Now this is what another white man was saying about another white. He said, word has a reputation that any Negro born on his plantation must remain there for the rest of his life in 1943. So that means if a child was born in that plantation in 1943, in 1963, he still was owned by this man. $150 just to be born in the sharecroppers' floor or in the cotton field. That's what he was saying. You owe me, and you're not getting away. Before I close out, I met a man named Willie King, and he was one of the finest blues singers in the Mississippi Delta that I met. And he said, Antoinette, he said, they Muddy Waters arranged for me to perform on this plantation, but I had to meet them at the store. And when he met them at the store in 1970s now, they blindfolded him. And they picked him up at the store. And they took him to the plantation. And he said, when I got to the plantation, it was like back in the 1800s. Not only did those that was enslaved talk about it, but there's some who feel like what their ancestors and what their family members did is not right. And it's going to take people to stand up for what is right. Slavery is wrong in any form. It is wrong. And what was done to those like May and like her family is she went to her grave, but she was free because she told her story.